Okay, so good evening to all of you, and good afternoon to those in India and to the westernmost countries. And good morning to Laura. Laura is in Louisville, Kentucky. Hi, Laura. Yeah. Okay. So good morning to everyone, and this is our first of our monthly online learning sessions. So last December, we had our IP Summit here in Ho Chi Minh City. And as promised, we are going to have our monthly session that will help us in this journey in the tech transfer cycle. Okay. And this evening, we're going to talk about the invention disclosure, okay? Getting your innovations from R&D in your university or in your organization, and then converting that, okay, putting it in the process of getting the inventions out. Okay, so it starts with disclosing or declaring these inventions. And with us, we are very happy to that Laura Savatski, okay, is with us to talk about invention disclosure in the University of Louisville. Okay. But before that, I would like to acknowledge everyone who's here. Okay. So one of the first to join us is Anson. Hello. We have Mihu. We have Shalini. Okay.
Hello. Hello.
We have
Happy
Johnny
New Year.
Karn. Happy New Year. Johnny Karn. And we have Harun. Hello, Harun.
Hello, Vlad.
Okay.
Hello.
We have Jakrit from Thailand.
Hello, good evening.
Okay, Kamonart.
Hi.
We have Kamonart. And then we have uh, Kan, who is with us. Hello, Kan. Okay, we have Manvik from Fiji. Hi. Palina from Laos. And Gay from Bhutan. Utkal from Fiji.
Hola, hello everyone.
And Vani. Hello, Vani from India. We have Wok from Vietnam. And who else is here? I guess everyone's here. Okay. And we are recording this session, so we can all come back to this to the recording. Okay. So let us begin, and we will invite Laura to talk to us about invention disclosure. And please, if you have any question, okay, you can put it on our chat. And we also have the link of invention disclosure of the University of Louisville. Okay. So let's invite Laura to join us all the way from Louisville, Kentucky.
Good morning and good afternoon and evening, everyone, wherever you are, as the time zones may be. I'm really happy to be here again this morning for me to talk about innovation disclosure. This is for us in the tech transfer offices. This is where it all starts. This is our jumping off point for our work, most typically. And I wanted to preface this whole thing with kind of the overall work cycle. And, you know, we talked about many things when I was there in Ho Chi Minh City that might surprise you about tech transfer, being new to it. And one of them kind of fits within this innovation disclosure piece, and that is how many innovation disclosures you get and how it results in so few licensed products in the end, and how you lose things along the way. So there's this approximately more or less 50% reduction all along the way. And even before innovation disclosure, I think probably at University of Louisville, about half of all innovations never get disclosed actually to our office, that there is a lot of hidden innovations out there. So even before innovation disclosure, what we're doing before we start that process is promoting it and spreading the word and letting people know that we are there. So a few times a year, we broadcast a message to the university broadly in a newsletter or other public announcements, whatever means we have available to us, about the existence of our office and that we know people are being innovative in their work, and to come to us with their disclosures, because they will never come to you with an innovation disclosure if they don't even know, number one, they're supposed to, number two, where to go, and that you exist, and that you're excited to talk with them. Other thing I'll say about that is that I don't know if you've ever had a party and you've given invitations to a whole big group of people, and it's just a written invitation that goes broadly out. And then you have the party and you think, my turnout was not that great. But if you go the step of making a one-on-one verbal introduction of the parties happening, and you want to give them a personal invitation, you get a much better response rate. The same happens with invention disclosure. When you go to your top researchers and introduce yourself and say, I'd love to talk with you about what we can do for the innovations coming out of your lab, it raises their awareness of you. So in a new office, oftentimes the best way to get new disclosures in are having one-on-one meetings with people to do that. Has anyone here in the group, I wanted to open it up for a conversation. Has anyone here been at an invention disclosure meeting? And would anyone here be willing to describe their experience and what it was like for them? I'll give you a second to think about whether or not you have courage to open up your mic and talk about that. I bet Shalini has, but there might be others here as well.
Yeah, I do, but I'll wait for the others because I've been doing this for a while.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else?
Yeah, I have my experience, but my boss just told me to write on a one-page thing.
Mhm.
He saw what I made, and then he said, "Okay, yeah, make an invention disclosure," but it's not really a meeting. Just handed me the form.
So one experience with handing a form, that's pretty common. It's a pretty common way to start. What about your experience, Shalini? What was the disclosure process like for you? You were probably on the receiving end, right?
Yeah. So the one thing is, I have to tell the inventors that I am not a mind reader. So you have to come down to my level and explain to me, assuming I am at 8th grade level, because they are sitting at that level where they know everything about their subject matter. and they walk into your office and assume you already know a lot of things which you don't, if you're the person who's filing the patent. And the other thing is they leave out all those specifics from invention disclosure. So I'm going to go through yours, but mine is fairly detailed. The invention disclosure form, where I have them laid out like a story, starting with the background and the problems, and then ending with diagrams and flowcharts and any other collaborations that they have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the other thing that I've noticed in sitting in invention disclosure meetings is oftentimes the scientists will, they want their idea to get patented, right? They want it to get through to the next step. And many of them think this is a contest to like impress me with their knowledge. And to Shalini's point, they tend to talk in really big technical terms that are specific to their field. And each one of us as a person, we only have so much bandwidth in our brain to be an expert in so many areas, right? And I'm an expert in a few, but only a few, just like probably they are. But the disclosures that I'm listening to often are outside of my field of expertise. And when they start speaking like that in these really complicated, very detailed terms right off the bat, right at the beginning, they can lose me, right? So really the purpose of the disclosure process is to understand what the innovation is at its key part. So Shalini's comment of not a mind reader, talk to me like I'm, a generalist at an 8th grade level, that's a really great way to set up the conversation, at least initially, so that you understand what's being disclosed. Shalini, did you have another comment?
Yeah, just to follow up to what I was saying, is the inventors have worked on their research and they are bound by it. So when, as a person who is filing their patents, if we talk about broadening the scope and trying to get more intangible estate for them, they get a little nervous or uncomfortable with that. So if they have a pH range of, say, 9 to 10, and I try to push from 8 to 11, then they get uncomfortable saying, "Oh no, we cannot change the pH level to that extent." And all I'm trying to do is get more of what is unclaimed territory in that field. So convincing them to broaden the scope in terms of drafting the application is a bit of a challenge sometimes.
Yeah. And to add to that theme, I think it has to do with the way that scientists are trained. They're trained to be very conservative and not to make huge, broad claims without specific data to support those claims. So when you say, we just had an innovation disclosed to us, which was an AI tool to help read a certain type of banding pattern on a gel in a diagnostic laboratory type situation. And they were talking about a very specific diagnosis of a B cell cancer and looking for clones of B cells by looking at this banding pattern. Well, there are many other kinds of diagnostics where you look for clones or multimers of bands that form very similar kinds of patterns, but they're not in cancer. They might be in other blood diseases. And when I brought this up, it was just about a month ago, to our inventors. It was right before I left for my trip to Ho Chi Minh City. I was working with one inexperienced inventor and one very experienced inventor. The very experienced inventor had to help coach the new inventor through the process of accepting what I was saying of let's broaden this out, and instead of providing to the patent office just a single example of this artificial intelligence tool working, let's provide them 2 examples and then talk about how you would use this for additional diseases and mention those diseases by name and say one could develop this tool using the same steps that we took to call the bands and to space them out. But you could apply this to other diseases than just this one. And that makes this patent much more valuable because different disease markets, they are what they are, and each market has its own products for it. And that makes the patent at the end of the day more valuable if you have a broader scope. Now, that said, that's a bit of what we call a double-edged sword. There's 2 sides to that. In addition to you trying to broaden the scope, you can also, if you don't provide enough evidence, but you just kind of allude to it or talk about it in the specification, but you don't write claims around it and or those claims aren't accepted, you can actually hurt your future chances of getting a patent in that area by disclosing that and talking about that in the patent application without getting claims to issue from it. Shalini, did you have another comment? Or is that your hand from before?
No, sorry, accident.
Okay. So, sorry, you're bouncing around on the screen. Oh, there you are again. So as you're taking in the disclosure, there are a few different ways to do it. You know, you can send a form, you can ask them to work on the form ahead of time. You can have a brief meeting with them to walk them through the elements of the form, to say, okay, these are the basic questions. Before they fill it out, you can ask them, do you think you have what you need to fill this out? Would you like to do it together? With a new inventor, I ask them a lot of questions about what their comfort level is in doing this on their own. And I try to at least set up a very short meeting, maybe 10 or 15 minutes, to just walk them through the form and then ask them if they have any general questions for me, and set up a time to take in the disclosure through a meeting. I like to, once the form is initially filled out, talk through it, have them explain the answers to me. And then I usually have the form open to me and taking notes and supplementing what their answers were, or I'm rewording it or summarizing like a key point at the bottom. So similar to how Vlad is taking notes in our chat today, like of the key points, I will often take notes right on the initial disclosure of the key points so that I remember, because we use this disclosure document now to trigger a patent filing if it passes. So it helps to remind me and our patent lawyers where to go with the patent. So does anyone have a copy of the disclosure? I'm not great at sharing my screen. I'm wondering if someone from Fulbright could bring up the Louisville disclosure and put it up on screen.
I can share that.
Okay. So
Okay.
one of the 2 key elements of the disclosure that you're trying to get to are 2 broad questions. Is it patentable? Is it marketable? Right? So, meaning if it's patentable, do you think you can get a patent? And then if it's marketable, do you think you can find a customer for this, right? Those are the two things. So if you want to just arrow down a little bit on the disclosure, we're just going to walk through it. So in the very first section, you ask them for, a title and the approximate date that the idea was first conceived or created. This is actually important because people move around and shift around in their jobs. You want to make sure with this very first question that the disclosure belongs at your university or institution. Meaning, did they start work on this before they came to your place, right? If they started work before they came to your place, and what I do is I go back and I check with HR their start date. Then I ask them more questions. So that will trigger some additional questions like, what was the work that you did there? Did you just start to have the idea, but it wasn't finalized? Who did you work with there, etc.? So you get more questions based on that date. So you want to understand whether or not you should be having an additional conversation with their previous employer. So the next question you ask is if they have other attachments, publications, papers, etc., that they're going to submit with this. Oftentimes, when they get all done with the form, they forget that they have other things already written about this, and they forget you. And the simple checkbox right at the beginning reprompts me to look for that. Like they have something else besides just this form. There's an actual other attachment I should be looking for.
Paper.
And then next is the innovation related to a previous submission. Is this an improvement to a previous submission? Is it in the same subject matter space as a previous submission? At a new office, having this question form probably isn't really that necessary for you because you're going to remember with this short runway that you have that they didn't have one or that they did have one. Okay, this next piece is this very brief description. This is the 8th grade level description, very short, very targeted. What I'm wanting to see here is, can they help me start writing the essence of what is the innovation? If I were to market this and I had to put a couple of sentences down to describe, this is an innovation that helps interpret gels for B-cell lymphomas by doing multimeric analysis. That this is what I need to know here in this brief description. And this often helps us with our very first marketing campaigns and marketing materials that we develop, this initial description. Okay, keep going down, Vlad.
It's also very short. It's like 50 to 100 words, right? It's like the essence.
50 to 100 words, yeah.
The essence.
And then what I do as well is I'll take the initial description and copy and paste it into a Word document for myself, and then recraft it or rewrite it for a marketing description. So here, this is a little section that we add that is just a very brief educational piece that describes what IP is, and that this form is for both patentable things and copyrightable things. And it gives them a link to the USPTO and describes the 3 main bars to patentability, which we're going to have some questions about later in the form, but describes that to be patentable, it has to be new, meaning novel, useful, meaning having a practical application, and non-obvious, which is that that category that is a little bit difficult to describe until you actually get lots of experience with obviousness rejections, and it seems to change and morph over time a little bit. But so those 3 patentability bars, and then it gives them the USPTO website for more information. Same thing here around copyright, gives them a very brief general understanding of what copyrights are and directs them to more information at the USPTO about copyrights. So there are 2 sections within this form, one that's focusing more on copyright material, and the other is more for patentable inventions. So it's explaining the existence of the 2 subsections below. So if you want to arrow down a little bit, okay. Keep going. So here the first section is patentability. So now here are these 3 questions, these 3 key questions. So we're asking them, number 1, how is the innovation new or novel? Like, what is it that's new about this, right? So we have this general description up above of what the innovation is. We have maybe attachments of manuscripts or presentations that we can learn about the innovation more in the technical words of the inventors. Now we want them to help us see why it's new or novel. You know, what is not in the public domain currently. So this can be a hard question for them to answer.
Is this also,
go ahead, Glenn.
Should this be stated in an 8th grade level, like an essay, or so that you will understand the newness of this invention?
Yeah, sometimes I counsel people here, how is the innovation new or novel? I will ask them to explain to me the closest other examples of this innovation. Like, what is the closest thing you've seen done to your innovation? It could be that there are, like for this gel reading example, that there are other examples of looking at densitometry and looking at calculating band densities using an AI tool, but maybe it's not both the spacing and the density and a comparator of the density of one band to the density of the rest of the bands, like the total cumulative densities. So maybe for this case, they will say to me, there are other examples of this for looking at and quantitating the amounts of proteins in particular gels, but they just look at a single band, not all of the bands that run on the gel. They don't add up all of the bands on the gel and then look for a propensity of 1 band, 2 bands, or 3 bands amongst the 30 bands that show. So they might give me an answer like that, and then I will know, there isn't another product out there that's looking for clonality of bands. Okay. Next question is, how is it useful? So this is a question that can be hard for some inventors when they come to you and they say, I remember some disclosures that we've had around new intracellular pathways, like signaling pathways. So when cells work in biology, they work through these complex communication networks and signaling pathways. And many inventions that were disclosed to me when I was at Versity had to do with signaling pathway biology, because it was an area of a lot of research interest at the time. And it was always very difficult when I had an inventor who learned of a new signaling pathway to answer this question if they learned about this new pathway, but they couldn't do anything with it. Like they couldn't effect any change in the cells. I remember counseling one of our inventors actually through the entire inventive process and helping him create an invention out of something that previously wasn't patentable, because what he had brought to me was a law of nature. He brought to me the existence of this pathway. And I'm like, well, that's good. Let's see, how does this pathway work in the cell? Okay, I understand it goes from here to here. And it's this pathway was an offshoot of an understanding of where inflammation and signals that control inflammation and signals that control cytotoxicity or cell death, where they converged in the cell. It's like where the two pathways converged, and that you could block one side of the pathway. You could block the inflammation side of the pathway without blocking the cell's ability. These were T cells and NK cells whose natural function is to kill things. That's their role in life, is to kill stuff in our bodies. You could block the inflammation part, but still have them be effective at killing. So I had to walk him through this question of how is it useful? And I had to walk him through, okay, now you know of the existence of this. Can you block it? Can you block this pathway? And what would that look like? What would happen if you blocked it? And what happened with this disclosure that he brought to me was that it wasn't ready initially. And that's the other thing you need to be looking for as you take in these disclosures is it complete, right? So you might get answers to these questions like, is it novel? Is it useful? Is it not obvious? And the invention might not be ready quite yet, but that doesn't mean it will never be ready. It just means it's not ready quite yet.
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are there instances where you have to bring in another expert? I mean, in that conversation you were describing, you were an expert in this. You know this very well. But are there instances where you have to bring in another expert to probe this invention?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were a couple of times where we had some new inventors at our research institute, and they were looking at areas that I wasn't super scientifically knowledgeable about. Mm-hmm. So they were both new, and I couldn't be kind of that second scientific voice in the room. Often, I did do a program that I called Patent Buddies, where I took new inventors and I buddied them up with a seasoned inventor, somebody who had done this before. And it helped to have voices in the room that could help explain or see some things that I wasn't seeing. Patent lawyers can also do this job and do it very well. But the reason that I instituted the Patent Buddy program was because I didn't have a lot of money in my program. I didn't have much budget. So I had to do a lot of this work on my own before we hired the lawyer in, because the lawyers make a lot of money per hour. And you have to pay them for their time because that's only fair. But I was using other experts. I will say some offices use outside committees. You have to be careful when you use outside experts that you have a confidential disclosure agreement in place, because remember, you're actually terming this agreement a disclosure. If you have people within your own organization that have a duty to keep information confidential, which they do, and it's belonging to the same place, it will be assigned to the same corporate entity or nonprofit entity, then that's not a public disclosure. That's within your company. But if you're hiring an expert from the outside, don't forget you need to have an NDA in
Yeah,
place,
an
a
NDA.
non-disclosure agreement.
So if the partner, if the other expert is from the University of Louisville, then there are no other needed agreements, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So usually I'll try to find somebody internal. That internal person can also act a little bit as a mentor and help them find other things and resources available within the university, other people to talk to that they know of scientifically. So I often use this. And some of the teams, sometimes you'll have a very large inventor team and you won't need a lot of external experts, but it's really those cases where you have a single inventor where you almost want a third person in the room to help you hear and get it, right? It works a little bit better.
And going into, I guess there's also this interplay between newness and usefulness, right? Like when it's something new, then it becomes, it has a new facet of usefulness. Is that correct?
It can, yeah, it can, you might be looking at a completely novel market, right? So the very first time that people did genetic analysis, like the very first time that DNA was sequenced and somebody sequenced DNA for the very first time, that was a completely new, useful area of diagnostic testing, right? And that morphed over time, and now we have things like polymerase chain reaction and cloning and new uses, new scientific uses based off of that initial discovery. Yes, there's a question. Vanshri?
Yeah. Vanny?
Vanny? Vanny, did you have a question? I see your hand raised.
Yeah.
We can't hear you.
We cannot hear you. Can you write down your question?
Maybe just post it in chat, Vanny.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving down. So obvious, I would say, if you think that, I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time here because it's hard to predict what the patent examiner is going to find obvious and not obvious. It's really kind of a judgment call. But if you think that this innovation was super obvious, it kind of goes into novelty, in my opinion. It's not that different than what's currently known. If you have a hard time thinking, this is an exciting new innovation, probably the patent examiner will too, and they're going to try to take you down with obviousness rejections. This is also a place where I might ask them, describe why others haven't made this invention. You know,
because
what makes
I'm so smart. Nobody thought about it.
All right, and arrowing down some more.
Okay. And so before we go ahead, there will be an assignment for each one of us. We are going to make our invention disclosure, okay, for that thing that's not so secret, and you can disclose it to all of us. And as a default, we're going to use the University of Louisville form for this invention disclosure.
Okay.
That's a question. Okay. Hi. Does similar product prior art reference help in IDF stage?
Yes. So there might be a similar product, and as long as you can differentiate your patentable idea from that similar product, having a similar product can be a really helpful thing because it means that the market has already been developed. So you can see that if a product is already selling in that area, that there is an economic appetite for that kind of product, right? You can see that that type of product sells. And you can figure out some things about that similar product as well. It really depends on the product and your innovation, like how similar are they really? Does your, I tend to think in bigger pieces, and I just try to think broadly. Is this innovation better, faster, cheaper? So I don't know if you've heard of that acronym, but for an invention to be saleable, it has to be significant, right? It can't just be almost exactly like the similar product, right? It has to be significantly better, faster, or cheaper. So that's what the market is going to look at, because there's a cost for them to change, and there's a cost for them to try a new product, right? It costs them time to change, and people generally don't want to they don't want to change their whole operation with a new product. It's not like trying a different kind of shampoo. Often it's different. It's more complicated than that in business. They have to validate these products work. They have to make sure they're getting consistent results. They have to make sure that the performance characteristics that they've become accustomed to in the old product are still working just as good as. So think about that too with your new innovation. If you're taking anything away from the existing product, you might be opening up a whole new attribute that's really nice and really needed in the market. But if you lose anything that's currently available, oftentimes that is not palatable. That is not something that the market will tolerate, is losing a feature. They just want things that are more. Okay, so here's the copyright section. How is your innovation original? Does it incorporate works from other sources? Oh, sorry, the research tool piece I kind of skipped over, but this is just a little checkbox that helps people identify if this is a tangible type of a tool. That's what we talk about for research tools, things that are tangible, like the creation of an antibody or the creation of a vector or a new mouse strain or a new material that they've created, something that they can have that has a tangible a tangible element to it. Okay.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Okay, incorporating or utilizing works from other sources. This is especially true of, for example, software code. So if it's a software that's being disclosed to you, you need to understand where the code came from. Was it public code? Is it cobbling together parts of other already known codes? Software can be patentable. It often is not or is not patented just because you can use copyright to protect software. If the software operates or works in completely novel ways, then it can be patentable, and patenting might be considered. But you can also get protection on software from copyrights. But you have to, copyrights protect the exact work. Imagine the copy of Van Gogh's Starry Night painting, very famous painting, or the Mona Lisa painting. Imagine that original painting, right? And now somebody like me, I tried to make a copy of that Mona Lisa painting, right? My Mona Lisa painting compared to Leonardo da Vinci's is extremely different. They're representing the same idea, woman, long brown hair, sitting there, right, with a mysterious smile on her face. But no one is going to really mistake my painting for Leonardo da Vinci's.
So
I'm
you're
not going to be infringing that copyright
Okay, yeah.
by making a copy of it that's very different. It's actually going to be very different. And so that is something to consider within copyright as well. Can there be copies of this made that have some significant changes but operate in the same way? In that, if that's the case and it's a really lucrative market, you might look for pathways or look for ways to patent this so that you can patent the general sense, the general idea, if it's something brand new.
So what we did in our company before is that the system is patented, and then the software, which is part of the system, it's part of the system. So we're not patenting the software, but the system that contains the software. Yeah.
Right.
There's a question here from Harun. For an innovation, can patent and copyright both be applied?
Yes, we just talked about that. Vlad just answered that question.
Yeah. Okay.
You can, and you can look for strategies for both. The upside of copywriting is it's fairly simple and straightforward and not as expensive as patenting. The upside for patenting is it's more broadly applicable, but of course the downside is it's for a shorter time frame. You can't just get one on a patent. You have to do an application. It has to go through this process and be granted. Copyrights are more, they don't look at whether or not your work is creative. They just give you the copyright, and then people dispute it later. So if you might have read the Harry Potter book series and saw this very famous case that J.K. Rowling, the author of the Harry Potter book series, was accused of copyright infringement, of getting the main idea out of somebody else's books, like the plot for the Harry Potter series. She wasn't found to be infringing the copyright, though, because she wrote a new book with new characters and new things in it. If any of you have ever read a romance story, they follow the exact same plot. One is almost the same as the next one, right? So these books are individually copyrightable because they're not exactly the same. It's very similar with software as well. Someone could make some relatively insignificant tweaks to it and have a new product and not infringe your copyright. But copyright is still significant to the marketplace. Okay. Other considerations. Here's where we ask them if they've had any past public disclosures and to describe that. Like, was this work presented in an abstract or poster? This helps us with the timings. So if we have 1 year to get behind the invention, this helps us understand what the dates of those disclosures were. And then the next question is, what is their future public disclosure? They're often coming to us with their invention right before they're going to submit their manuscript or as they're preparing their manuscript. And so we want to understand what the timeline is so that we get a patent filed before they have a public disclosure.
I had my classmates before at Penn State. They submit the patent application and the manuscript at the same time. So why does timing really matter in this case?
Because after you do the initial analysis, you might see that you are maybe on the fence about filing this patent, or you might see that you would like them to go back and provide an additional example so that you can get broader protection. And you might counsel them for that. But the initial idea, if they're going to be submitting this abstract and then it's going to get accepted for publication and publish, that creates something called a bar date. So that creates, in essence, a public disclosure, public record of this innovation. And you have to be aware of it so that you can file before it or within the 1 year grace period.
So there's also already a disclosure when you publish something, when you publish the idea in conference or journal.
Yeah, because once the idea is published and publicly available, it's no longer novel. And that is one of the requirements of patentability. So it's oftentimes the inventor's own actions that create a problem for you within the patent office. When I look for prior art in the field, the very first place that I look is at publications of the inventors that are listed on the application. I look at their work. Is what they're submitting to me significantly different or not predicted by their own work?
How about in social media, So before, when there were no social media to, broadcast your ideas, especially on LinkedIn or Facebook. Now, what do you advise to researchers regarding these other media when they're doing disclosures?
I've not had any experience with there being a public disclosure on social media, just because social media within the US anyway, for the most part, is more about like friends and family and announcing events and things like that. People typically aren't publishing their research on social media because they know that they're saving that for their trade journals. So next we ask them about the stage of development and what's planned next. We also ask them about use of outside materials. So sometimes, I see we have another question. I'll get to it in a second. Sometimes they use outside materials like a building block for the innovation. So this pathway I was describing before, blocking this cytotoxic pathway, if our inventor had gotten a vector from an outside source to do this blocking work, there might be requirements within the material transfer agreement that controlled this peptide. They might say things like, you need to disclose to us if you are doing applications so that we can look to see if we also are an inventor. It might say you cannot file a patent application or you cannot incorporate this material into a patent application. That typically doesn't happen. It's usually more around disclosure that you have to disclose to the other party. So the question in chat is, does a prototype and users' feedback would easy to accept the claims? Okay. Oh, so does making a prototype and having user feedback on the prototype, does that make it easier to the claims? Not really. that's more about the commercial potential. The prototype, yes, because you're showing that the invention operates, but what the market thinks about it, the user feedback, isn't that relevant unless the users are giving you the feedback of it works, right? The basic feedback of the invention works or it doesn't work. That can help you with claims, but typically the patent office does not ask you for any evidence of, does it not work. They don't typically ask you for other people's opinions other than the inventor's own opinions, the inventor's own declarations. And the standards are, I'm the inventor, I live at this address, I'm the one who created this invention. Those are the standard declarations. There sometimes are also declarations made as to the fitness of the invention for working in the way it was described. That's typically also a part of the declarations. But
I guess the prototype,
what other users' feedback is or is not isn't necessary, and it typically isn't relevant to patent applications.
I guess the prototype and user feedback, it gives you confidence as the inventor as to that this invention actually works and could be well marketable.
Yep. The user is extremely important for the commercial aspect of the invention, which I think we're going to talk about a little bit more the next time. Compliance reporting. Here we talk about, or we ask for any kind of funding that they've gotten to create this invention, because we have to look at whether or not there are reports that we have in federal agency to funding agencies. We ask them for the specific grant numbers. We ask them if they're going to be applying for future funding. Sometimes they will say, yes, we want to apply to this program or that program. And this helps to leave us a few breadcrumbs when we have an initial filing and they can work. We can be probe on this question. We can say, oh, I saw that you were going to apply for this kind of SBIR funding or this kind of kinetic funding or whatever it was, because there are reporting requirements that go with certain of those different grants. And if they did use it in the invention process, as in the later stages, those have to be reported as well.
Okay.
And we're reaching more of the end now. Here's the commercial stuff. So that was the patent stuff. And now we've got the commercial impact considerations. And these are general questions about what problem does your idea solve? Why is it significant? Why are people going to be excited about this? What's the nearest competition for this new product or service? How is the problem that you're solving being addressed currently? Here we're trying to get at what does this new innovation do that old innovations don't? We ask them for comparable products, processes, or services. We ask them to identify interested partners or market contacts. This especially this market contacts section. For us to see, is this what we would call a no-brainer? Doesn't take much thought to say, yes, we should move forward with this. They might list here that, oh yes, we're working with SmithKline on this compound, the small compound that we're creating in our laboratory for the past 3 years or 4 years. Then it's like, well, obviously we're going to try to patent that, right? So we're asking them if they have connections within the marketplace, if they've operated with commercial partners before. That's all a really good sign if they've had partnerships with other companies, worked on similar products. And then you can keep going down. Now we're asking them to envision what the end their service would look like. Like, is it a kit? Is it a service that somebody, like a service laboratory? Is it a new material that some company would sell? You know, in general, what is it? What is the commercial product? What kind of impact does innovation have on society? Some innovations, especially in alternative kinds of spaces, like if you don't have a medical school, you might not get any drugs, but maybe you have a school of social work or some other a school of education, and you're going to be creating products that are better ways to teach or better ways to deliver a nursing service. So some of these social impact kinds of questions can be important in understanding which markets that the product targets and what the product is and is not. So the societal impact question also goes to the size of the market and who would care about this kind of product, right? So the bigger the impact, larger the populations of people, the bigger the problem that's in society that's being addressed, the more that this could have value. And then this is the last question: are they interested in starting a company to license the technology? Meaning, do they have a startup interest? Okay,
All right.
and that's it. Then we just ask them for additional information and to submit it. We ask them for their contact information, for them to sign this, saying they acknowledge the existence of the policy. And within the policy is the assignment language as well. So
great. Yeah, so this is a very informative, and I think this is a good starting point for all of us to do our assignment. And so we identify. So each one of us, okay, as part of our learning journey, we identify innovations in our R&D labs, our organizations, and we create our invention disclosure. Okay, especially for those that are willing to disclose. Okay. And yeah, please email that to us at Fulbright. And Laura, what are we going to talk about? So this is just part one of invention disclosure. What are we going to talk about in part two? Which
part two will be hopefully we'll have a chance with their assignment to talk about their own experience a little bit with invention disclosure. We might have a couple of examples of people trying to go out and use a form similar to this, and feel free to download this form and copy and paste sections of it and brand it and make it your own. These aren't these questions aren't that they're not copyright protected, so don't worry about that. Just make the form your own and try to get an example of an invention within your university, or just get feedback from one of your inventors. Like, try to go out and target and find somebody and make a introduction to them and say to them, I thought you might have innovations coming out of your area. We've got this new disclosure and I wanted to tell you about it, and here it is. I present it here to you. Please consider it for the future. And so you can start just building that relationship with them around announcing that you have a disclosure form for them to consider. So
Great.
And you might be
Yeah.
surprised just in that initial conversation, making that initial invitation, you will be amazed how many people say, oh, actually, I do have something.
Yeah. I think Harun is ready to go with his invention disclosure from his previous invention. Okay. So we'll so within the following week, so we'd like to hear about your invention disclosures. Please submit that as part of the documentation of your learning journey. And as we close with this session, we are going to have a photo op. Okay, so as part of our reunion, we're going to let's turn on our cameras and I'll take a picture. Okay, one. Okay, let's give 10 seconds to everyone. Show us your pretty faces. Okay, so I'll take a picture. Okay, 1, 2, 3. All right, let me paste it first on our WhatsApp. All right, so that is invention disclosure part 1, and part 2 will be on February 24. Okay, so this will be kind of a public webinar. So we will have an extended audience from all the countries that are participating. So let's thank Laura. Thank you, Laura, for waking up early and sharing with us. And look forward to all your submissions of your invention disclosure. And
Okay.
Thank you.
Happy New Year to everyone. And great to have this reunion every month.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Happy New Year. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Happy New
Thank you,
Year.
Bye-bye.
viewers.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Thank you very
Bye.
much.
Bye.
Bye.